The first step to creating your own little Beachy magnet is to paint your canvas panels. Now these panels we purchased at Hobby Lobby. They're the Master's Touch brand. They're $4.99 for a 6-pack, but you can always get these on sale. They're on sale all the time. Not all the time, but you know, they're on sale a lot. So we have the 2" by 4" panel and the 3x3 panel that we are gonna work on today. So we're just gonna get a little bit of paint on each of these using some acrylics from the craft department. For the darker blue version, we are gonna use the navy blue by Folk Art, as well as the Skyline by Folk Art. We're also going to use some white, and this is Anita's white, and I just buy this in the huge bottle because I use a lot of white. For the more teal one, we're going to do a little sweet something to this before we add our glass and resin. But for that one, we're going to use the Anita's Island Green Verde, and we're going to use the Americana Aqua Sky as well as the white too. So we are just going to get started, and I'm going to start with a darker blue, and it's just going to be a slappy happy little painting mess. So I'm just going to add some color to my palette for the darker version. I'm going to add a little bit of the Skyline. Don't need much. A little bit of the navy blue. Had to check the color. And we're going to add some whites. And this is going to be a very abstract, kind of messy process, so don't feel like this is going to be some sort of fine art thing. Okay, so I'm going to just take my colors on my palette, and I'm going to start with the 2 square, the 3" squares. I'm going to use just a let's see what this is. It is a number 4 plaid. It's just a flat brush, small flat brush. I'm going to wet it a little bit, get the moisture out of my brush, and I am literally just going to start adding color. I'm going to start with a little bit of white just at the very bottom on each canvas. And they don't have to be the same, and they don't have to be perfectly covered. Just a little bit of white at the very bottom of those 2 canvases. Now the next step is going to be the next lightest color. And I'm going to use the same brush that still has white in it. I'm going to just get a small amount of that blue on my paintbrush, and I'm just going to blend in. We're going to move up about a third of the way. And then we'll come back down and lightly blend that in to the white. All right, so we create a little bit of an ombre effect on this one. Okay, we're going to do the same thing over here. Just a little tiny bit of blue on your brush. We're going to come up about a third of the way. A little bit more. And once we have that covered, we're going to come down and kind of blend in to the white that's still wet, just to kind of create not a harsh line. We want the line to be blended and not harsh. Okay, so our next step is going to be our navy. Same brush, same old brush. We're going to dip into our navy and do the same thing. I'm going to start kind of close to the top and just get my color filled in. The canvas is a little textured and a little grabby, so make sure you have a nice moist brush. So now I'm just going to blend into that color, the middle color. Just blend down so you don't have a harsh line. And we'll do the same thing on this side. We're going to start at the top. Get that color on. And we're going to manage those edges in just a minute. We don't want our edges to be icky. So we're just going to blend in. I'm going to get a little bit of white on my brush because that was a little dry. I just want, or actually I'm going to get a little bit of that medium blue. We'll just blend in until it's all covered. So we have kind of an ombre effect where it's darker than the medium color and then the white, but they're not harsh lines. Each color is blended into the next. So I'm going to go ahead and take my brush and just kind of pull some of that color over to the edge while I have the darker blue on my brush. I'm just going to hit those darker blue spots so that we don't have that white edge around our magnet. We want that color to flow over. We'll do this one. A little bit of color and just pull that darker blue over the sides. Just like that. Easy peasy. Okay, so now I'm going to go into my medium blue and we're going to just do the same thing. Just bring it down. Same thing over here, just bring it down a little. Just don't want that edge to be unfinished and icky because it's kind of hard to keep that color line straight. So I'm going to go into my white and do the white edge. And it's going to have a little bit of a blue unless you rinse off. Go ahead and rinse off so it's consistent. And we'll just do a little bit of white on that edge, blend it in with our blue. Then I'll flip it and we will hit that white on the bottom as well. So let's do this side and this one. These are not perfect by any stretch. I'm not even trying to make them perfect. I like the imperfection and the abstract quality. So these are our first step on, this is our first step on the darker blue version. So we're going to let these dry while we work on the 2x4 aqua colors. So we'll set these over here. I'm going to rinse my brush. Then I'm going to put my aqua colors on my palette. So what I'm using is the Island Green Anitas. Put a little bit of that over here. And the Aqua Sky, which is a medium color. And we're going to go back into that white as well. So I'm going to do the same thing generally. I'm going to rinse my brush. So I got the navy off. So I'm using the same brush. I'm going to start with my white. And I'm going to do about 1/3 of the piece in the white. I'll go ahead and hit that side. There's something on there that's kind of icky, but we'll hit that with the white paint. We don't like icky. We'll hit this one. We're going to cover about 1/3. Now we're going to do our medium color, which is the Aqua Sky. We're going to bring in and we're going to come about 1/3 of the way up again. I'm going to go ahead and hit my side so we don't have to come back to that. And then I'm going to ombre it down into my white. So I'm just taking that color and blending it down a little bit into the white so it's not a solid line between the two colors. Come do this side. Same thing, about 1/3 of the way up. Do our sides. And then we'll start blending in to that white. Now you have to kind of work fast. I mean, these, you don't want to spend a lot of time doing these because they're so easy, and it's better if you just let it flow. But you also want the paint to be wet enough that you can blend into the next color. Okay, so now I'm going to turn it around. I'm going to do my darker color, which is the island green. I'm just going to bring that up here to the sky. I'm going to hit my edge. I just need to start at the top where it wants to be the darkest. And then we'll ombre in, blend into that middle color. So there's no definite line to where one starts and the other stops. So we'll do the same thing over here. We'll start at the top because that's where we want it to be the darkest. We'll hit our sides. And we'll just start bringing the color down. And ombre in, blend in to that middle color. Voila. So these are pretty much ready except for one fine little detail. So I'm going to bring these over, and I just want to add a little smidge of white wavy look into our little pieces. So you can see on this one, see how I came in and added just a teeny bit of white that kind of looks like a white cap of the wave. So I'm going to rinse off my brush really nice, get it good and clean, get the excess moisture out, and I'm going to tip my brush, just the tip, in the white, and I'm going to come in on my darker blues. I'm just going to tip up in the dark blue, just a teeny little line or two of the white. So basically that's it. It's just that tiny little bit of a line. Now we're going to do the same thing, just a tip on your brush. We're going to do the same thing with the aqua. I'm just going to come in and just add a teeny bit, just barely touching the surface. Just add a teeny bit of a wave white cappy line. And voila. We're going to wait for these to dry really nicely. We're going to come back and do a little something special on the two aqua ones, and then we'll get to our glass shells and resin. So we'll see you when these are dry. We are back, and our cute little canvas panels are nice and dry, but before we move on to glass and resin, I want to do a little something special to these two aqua ones. Now what I've done is gone out on the interweb and found a cute little seahorse that I just printed on a piece of paper, and I reduced it down to the size I need. So this is about a 2.5-inch seahorse, and I printed it on photo paper because photo paper is coated, so it lasts a little bit longer if you get it wet from paint. And then I just cut out my little seahorse with my scissors. Then I actually cut it up the middle and then cut my shape, and then I used Scotch tape to tape that one end back together so that it's a nice solid stencil for myself. So I cut that little piece out, and now I want to stencil the seahorse onto my little aqua pieces. So I am going to use Anita's metallic white, which is kind of a pearl color, to stencil my seahorse on to my little canvas. And I'm going to use just a cheap little stencil brush that I got from the Hobby Lobby. So I am going to put a little bit of pearl on my plate, and here's the key. I'm going to go ahead and try to figure out where I want my little seahorse to be. We're just going to let him lay right there. I'm going to put my stencil brush into the paint and see how much paint I have. That's way too much for a stencil. So I'm going to offload a little bit of that onto my plate, and then I'm going to take it and just pounce. You don't want a glob of paint because if you have a whole bunch of paint on your stencil brush, it will seep up under and then it'll be a mess. So you don't want that. So offload and then just pounce. We're just going to have a little ghost of a seahorse on this piece. I need to hold this down because the stencil is bigger than my piece. So I'm going to get one more good pounce. Now I'm going to pull this up, poof, and look what we have. We have a cute little seahorse. It's just muted and kind of not a solid color. It's really reflective and pearl. So then we're going to add some things to that as well. So we're going to do one more. Just going to add him right there. I'm going to kind of hold the stencil with my fingers so it doesn't move. And I'm going to, that's too much, pounce off any excess and then just pounce on the color to your cute little canvas. Set it aside, pull it up. Cute seahorses. Oh my goodness, how adorable. So we're gonna let this dry for a few minutes and then we're gonna come back. We're gonna add some cute little glass elements and some shells and whatnot to our little canvas, and then we're going to add some resin. So we'll be back when these are dry. Friends, we are back and our cute little seahorses are nice and dry. So we are going to move on to the next step, which is adding a few cute little elements, and then we're going to pour some resin over the top of these. And then when they're dry, we'll add a little strip of magnet to the back. So the first thing I want to do though is I have these tiny little measuring cups. You can get them online. I have a friend who works in a hospital and she gave me a whole slew of these things, but you need something small to raise your little magnets off of the surface. I'm actually going to work and add my little elements first, but you do want to have these handy. If you don't have anything small enough for the skinny 2x4 magnet to sit on, just put a couple of thumbtacks in the back. You just want it raised up enough that it won't stick to the surface. If we poured resin right here on this canvas surface, then our piece would stick to the canvas. So you want it elevated. Alternatively, you can take, this is just a canvas, an 8x10 canvas that still has the plastic on it. Now resin will not stick to plastic, so you can actually lay it on here and pour your resin on here, but the thing you want to do if you do this is not have so much excess resin that it runs off and sticks onto the plastic, because then when you lift this off, it will lift off, but then you'll have all that excess resin hanging on to the side. So make sure that you have something you can elevate these little canvases with. Okay, so that's the first thing you want to make sure you have, is something to elevate. You can use those extended push pins or some little cup or something that you can elevate. The next thing we're going to use is, I have this cute little bag of tiny little seashells. So we're going to use a couple of seashells on each piece. I have some clear classic crushed tempered glass that we're going to use. And I also have a little bit of this mother of pearl crushed shell. That's kind of hard to say. That we're going to incorporate. And I have a tube of these seed beads that are glass. And I am going to add these to the cute little seahorse pieces so it looks like they're little air bubbles coming up. And lastly, we want to make sure we have glue. The glue I use is Aleene's Clear Tacky Glue, and I get this at Hobby Lobby. It dries clear, so it works really well with resin. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I'm going to take my two cute little seahorse pieces, and I'm going to add some glue to the bottom because these things are really small, and we don't want all our elements to be falling off as we're moving them around. So I'm just going to add a little bit of glue to the bottom of my little seahorse pieces, and I just came up about 3/4 of an inch, and all the way to the bottom, just to keep all our little things in place. So the first thing I want to do is add a little bit of glass. So I'm just going to take a few little nuggets of glass in my hand and just add those to the glue. Don't have to use a lot, just a few little nuggets. Doesn't take much because these are tiny. Okay, we may add more, but let's just keep moving. So now I've pulled out a couple of these shells that I love so much. These are those tiny horn-shaped shells, and then the little snaily shells. I love these. They're my two favorites. And I'm going to add a few little sprinkles of this mother of pearl. I'm just going to add those, make sure they get on just a few little flakes. That's probably 4 little pieces. So now I'm just going to add my little horn shell and one of these snaily looking shell pieces. And I am pretty much done. I'm going to add one more little nugget of glass. And then I'll oh, that's a huge nugget. So this piece is finished. We're going to add some resin. In just a minute, we're going to go ahead and finish up these other pieces. So I'm going to lay this one aside. We're going to do this one. I have another one of those little horn-shaped shells. Just going to add that in. And just add whatever little nuggets of goodness you want to add. I'm just going to add a few little shell pieces, some tiny little things. This is a really small piece, so you don't want to be too excessive. So there's this one, just a few little tiny shell pieces. So on here, I'm going to add the elements kind of across the bottom of the blue. So I'm going to add some glue just in that general area. My glue is wanting to be empty. Just to keep all my pieces in place. Now I'm going to add a little bit of glass. Push it around, move it where you want it to be. Don't make it too thick, because then it's too heavy. Just one thin layer of glass pieces. And then I'm going to come in and add a couple of shells that I've pulled out of my shell buckets. So I'm just going to add those. Maybe right here, and maybe a few of these little mother of pearl pieces, not too many. And we'll do the same thing on this one. We'll add a little bit of glass. Trying to get the smaller pieces because there are some bigger pieces when you get this glass, So I'm trying to avoid those because this is such a small little canvas. I don't want to have any great big things. A few little mother of pearl shells. Just a smattering of whatever makes your heart happy. And have another little seashell. We'll add that in. One here. And we are done with these. Okay, so before we finish these up, I need to mix up some resin. I don't want to put them on our little cups until I'm ready to resin because I don't want them to be teeter-tottered. So I'm going to put my stuff aside and we will mix some resin. Now I've already taken the liberty of putting part A in my cup. So we're going to be using art resin. This is what I use exclusively. It's a 2-part resin epoxy. It's a 2-part resin epoxy, and we're going to be adding, I'm only going to mix up 2 ounces because I do have a couple more of these, but this is only going to take just a spoonful. So I don't want to mix up an excessive amount, but we are going to mix these up. I've already poured the hardener in, 1 ounce of hardener into my cup. So now I'm going to pour the 1 ounce of the resin. So let me do that. It's a 50-50 mixture, the art resin is, but you need to follow the directions for whatever resin you are using. If you're not using art resin, you need to use or to follow the directions for whatever resin you are using because they may be different. Most resins have the same mix, but not always. So it may be a 70-20, it may be a weight measurement. So make sure to follow the directions on your resin. Okay, so this has to be mixed for 3 minutes according to the directions. So I am going to put my gloves on. I always wear gloves because even though art resin is non-hazmat and has no VOCs, it's still pretty sticky and I just don't like it on my hands. So we're always going to wear some gloves. And now, before I get started, I'm going to mix my resin for 3 minutes. So while we're mixing, we'll just fast forward right through this. But remember to follow the directions on your resin and mix for however long it tells you to. No shortcuts. Okay, we are done mixing our resin. So right now I'm going to elevate all 4 of my little pieces. So I'm going to put the square ones here. And I'll put, oops, I need to scoot over. Put this one here. And I'll put my little seahorses. Now we are going to add something to our seahorses after we get the resin on, but we're going to wait till we get the resin on because we're going to add some of those glass beads, those seed beads that I was telling you about, but we're going to wait till the resin's on because these are tiny and we don't want them floating around or running off the side. So I'm going to sprinkle those in after I get the resin on. So my resin is mixed 50-50, just like it tells you to in the directions, and I've mixed it, stirred it softly. Don't whip it. You want to just stir gently for 3 solid minutes. So now what I'm going to do is just start drizzling the resin onto my little magnets. I'm going to start in the glassy area because I want to make sure I get all that glass covered first because it will run off the glass and then run into the areas where there is no glass. And if you start with those areas first and then it runs off of your glass area, you're going to end up with too much resin. It's going to be pouring off the sides and we do not want that. So I've got all my glass covered. So now I'm just going to drizzle a little bit into those areas where there's not any glass. So then I'm going to do the same thing I'm going to start with my glass. Got a little drippage. Make sure all my glass and my shells are covered really nicely. Oops, teeter-tottering. I'm going to drizzle a little bit on the non-glassed areas. And we're going to just keep doing that. So I'm going to come down here to my little seahorses. I'm going to cover the glass bits. Drizzle a little bit on the flat surface. And we'll come back, do the glass. I wouldn't suggest doing one at a time because it's such a tiny amount of resin. I would suggest if you're going to make these to make a bunch. You don't want to mix up a teaspoon of resin. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my piece and where the resin is drizzled, I'm just going to use my finger to move that around. And make sure it's covered on all that flat surface. We'll put it back on its cup. Do the same thing here. Just move that where we drizzled on the flat portion. We'll just move all that around. Cover all the spots. Kind of wipe your sides down. I don't like it to drip over my edge too much. It causes a little bit of a mess on the underside of your canvas. So we're going to do the same thing with our little seahorses. I'm going to make sure that end is covered, all the glass is covered well. I'm going to run my finger around and cover all the flat surface of that canvas with the resin. Turn that sideways so I can kind of look at it. Same again. So you're going to do this to all your magnets, your little mini canvases, and make sure it's completely covered with resin and your glass is covered really well. Put them on my little risers. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to wipe a little bit of this off of my hands just with the paper towel, because what I want to do now is take these little glass seed beads, and this is Bead Treasure from Hobby Lobby, and it's called White Ceylon. They're tiny little beads. 12.0 is what they are, and I am going to just sprinkle a teeny tiny amount, and I'll show you close up. I'm just going to sprinkle a few right around his head area, and then I'm going to come down here and add a few to the resin glass area. So just a little drizzle and then a little drizzle. Close those back up because they're tiny and they will spill everywhere. So this is what you end up with for your seahorse. So he has a little bit of those beads here for like his bubbles, his air bubbles, and then we add a little bit to the bottom as well. So we are going to let these dry. These will take 12 hours minimum to dry. So we'll leave these here. If you're working at home, make sure you've protected your table with plastic and paper, because the resin will go through the paper, but it won't go through the plastic. So protect your surface with plastic and paper, and make sure you do this in a place where they can sit for 12 hours straight without anybody touching them, bumping them, wanting to mess with them. No animals, no children, no curious spouses. So put these in a place where they can sit still for 12 hours, and when they're dry, we'll be back and we'll look at them and do our magnet on the back, and then we'll be done. See you then. Hey friends, we are back. Our magnets are all dry. The resin is nice and dry. I left it to dry overnight, so we are ready to move on and finish these up. So I always sign my initials on the back of my little pieces or on the side, depending on what I'm doing. And I use a silver Sharpie, so I'm just going to sign this last one. And now we're ready to apply our magnets. So I purchased just this strip magnet from Hobby Lobby or Michael's or wherever. You can use whatever magnet works for you, but I like this. It's self-adhesive. So you just cut off what you want, and then you can just stick it right to the back of your pieces. So I'm just going to peel off. I like the peel and stick, and just stick it right to the back of my magnet. I like to do 2 pieces. I'm going to press it down really good. And I like to do 2 pieces per magnet, just for insurance. Now you want to let these sit for a couple of hours before you actually put them on a magnetized board. You want to, or on a metal board, you want that adhesive to really adhere to that canvas board before you actually put it on the board and apply weight to it. So put them on the back and just leave them there, you know, for a day, half a day, whatever. So you don't put any weight on those until they're really adhered nicely. So I'm just going to continue to peel and stick, and that is just about the end of it. Let's make sure we're upright. Press, 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 press. So we are good for these 2. Let's do these last 2, and then we will be done and ready to be finished. Now this is the no-brainer part, but I always like to include all the details. So we'll press those in, press them down really nicely. And the last one. If you hear the music in the background, I do not own the rights to that music. Have to say that so you don't get sued, I guess. I don't know if you can hear it or not. I got a little Jimmy Buffett going. So there are our magnets, completely finished. I hope you enjoyed this little tutorial. I hope you'll come and follow my Facebook page at artshatter.com, and we'd love to have you. See you next time.